Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. The Hawaii State Bar Association Senior Counsel Division in this session where we're open to and inviting all members of the bar and friends to join us. This afternoon, we get to hear from, to be quite honest, one of my very favorite speakers of all time, and I've heard some great ones. Dean Camille Nelson, whose bio has a link in the chat, so I'm not going to take up her time or yours with that. I will tell you a couple of things that are not in the bio. In addition to being an extremely highly respected national and international scholar, including in critical race theory and other areas of law, Dean Nelson is one of the at least 28 Black women law school deans in this country. We are extremely glad to see the needle moving.
And I'm sorry, Chuck, at the end of that, you were muted. So I don't know if anyone else can hear you, but I lost you there. Can you hear me? Just a thumbs up so I can tell. Okay, wonderful. Okay, so I'm gathering, even though I missed the last sentence, that you've passed the baton to me. And what I'm going to say is that it's such a delight to be here with you all. Thank you so much for thinking of me and for including me. I really, really appreciate it. And Chuck, thank you for your very, very generous comments. I really appreciate that. It's very sweet of you. Thank you. So what I thought I would do, as I am about to start, I think this is my 14th or 15th month, is to talk about this whirlwind year, no doubt for all of us, and to situate it from my perspective as a professor of law and the dean at Richardson Law. So a bit of a year in review. So the first thing I'd like to share is, last term, as the dean, I think in terms of terms, as I did when I was a faculty member teaching basically, full time. So last term, the talk was really about whether we are going to be back to normal, in quotes, this term, right? And, I like to say this is the new abnormal, because it's really hard to predict. And what we've encountered is, I believe, a resounding no has been the answer to that question. Some of it based on, variables, jurisdiction by jurisdiction, state by state, region by region, country by country, but certainly the plan was to be more in person than remote last term, but then the Delta variable hit. And understandably, there was a lot of, again, as the previous summer, a lot of pivoting by necessity. So really, we find ourselves again, largely remote for reasons that I think are reasonable, especially for an island state, that we really are trying our best to protect our community members and university colleagues, and frankly, the whole state from the scourge of this ongoing pandemic. I'm grateful that the numbers have been coming down, but really for the last almost 2+ years, certainly we have been knee deep in all things pandemic. What that's meant is, I was on a webinar recently, and we were introduced as leaders in higher ed who for the third academic year we're dealing with a pandemic, because you'll recall, right, this is really the third iterance of this pandemic upon us, as we came out of the spring term in 2020, moved into 2020-21, and now we're into 2021-2022. So I look forward to moving through this, but it really has formed the umbrella of crisis management and quickly trying to pivot within what are resource constrained institutions to do the best we can to deliver a quality legal education whilst centering everybody's health and safety. In that mix, obviously, is a robust conversation about the future of work, about what it means to be a part of an enterprise and an educational enterprise when we can understand that there are trend lines that will change dramatically likely after this pandemic is over. We're already seeing that many people prefer to work remotely, and people will, vote with their feet and walk, in terms of their own expectations around how they want to chart their own professional paths going forward. And I would suggest to you, this is not just in higher ed, this is across a number of sectors. And all of the newspapers, major newspapers, have run really interesting pieces on what does the future of work look like, especially as millennials are entering the workforce and have perhaps slightly different expectations in terms of work-life balance, access to remote work, flexible hours, et cetera, et cetera. So that's all in the mix for us as well. Under the big title of, how will the pandemic change higher ed? How has it changed higher ed, and how will it continue to change higher ed? And I would say these questions are on the table, especially as we think about online education going forward, remote education going forward, and distance ed going forward. And I say that because I also think there's an access question there, especially as we think about people from the neighboring islands and people from the other Pacific Island nations and communities, and the cost of ed, and a number of other factors that will lead us to, I think, be more creative in how we think about higher ed in the next 2 decades. I also want to just remind us about the last year. As I was thinking about this time, when I moved here, it was July of 2020. And, the George Floyd murder trial had not rendered a verdict at that point, right? We were just going into all of that, coming out of the horrific images of a number of police killings. And this is a huge part of what our students are also witnessing, if not experiencing, if not sort of reeling from nationwide. And certainly I was in DC before I moved here. And I just want to situate this because a lot of people are talking about the impacts on our students of the election, the racial reckoning. How could we forget last January, right? Many of us were transfixed and looking at our TVs in disbelief. And for so many of our students, these are formative moments. I mean, when we think back to our lives and we span the decades and we think, what moments have left an indelible imprint, if not a scar, in our sort of, tissue, spiritual tissue included? This has been an epic 2 years for our students, right? Insurrection, impeachment, inauguration. This is all the backdrop of their lives, during which they're expected to forge ahead, study hard for the incoming students, write the LSAT, and press forward. So I want to acknowledge the tumult and the backdrop of uncertainty and fear for many that has been a big part of their experience in higher education. Nationally, last year has been curious. Many people thought it was going to be a really challenging year for applications. It was actually a buoyant time. Perhaps it was because students were contemplating their futures in more intentional ways. Perhaps people had access to LSAT Flex, for example, and they could write the LSAT remotely. But many law schools, not all, but many law schools, including ours, saw an increase in applications. So that'll be interesting to see how things morph over the next several years. But against the backdrop of all I've said, people kept applying to law school. If we step back and plan forward and really think about what we need to deliberate upon, again, as I'm saying, for the next couple decades, one of the things that's really clear to us, and the university has urged as part of their Manoa planning for post-pandemic Hawaii process, is that we should do strategic planning. And we're just coming through these efforts now. We retained Peter Adler, who many of you know, who is a sociologist here, who has done a great deal of consultancy work for a number of organizations and entities, including the University of Hawaii system. And Blake Morant is a 2-time dean He was the dean at Wake Forest after being a long-serving professor at Washington and Lee. And then he was the dean at GW, George Washington in DC. And then at the same time, he became president of one of our accreditors, the Association of American Law Schools. So I brought them both in to work together, one local, one a national thought leader and higher ed leader, to help us with this strategic planning process that we recognize as necessary, in which the university has urged us to venture upon, partly because we're seeing a lot of changes in our legal landscape, but also within our own Richardson community. So one of the changes is, we're experiencing some retirements, and we've experienced some already, and we'll likely experience some more in the coming years as, we all go through life, and we all, enter our senior years and think about what's next for us. Hopefully with joy and anticipation. But what it means for us is we have to do some real succession planning to think about how we make sure that this is not a net loss to us, right? We really have to plan. And last year was tough because there was a hiring freeze, as everybody knows. So we've really lost not just 1 year, but 2, because the hiring of a law faculty member generally takes 6 months to 9 months, because there is a sort of a timeline that's laid down by one of our accreditors. So the freeze, prevented us from having people start with us this summer, because the process would have taken a year. So now we're venturing upon a process that will hopefully allow us to recruit some diverse talent who would start with us next summer of 2022. We're looking to hire 3 entry-level faculty members. So I'm grateful that the university has been supportive in this respect, but it's also a necessity as people retire, especially from teaching in our core curriculum, which of course is tethered tightly to licensure. We are also at the same time rapidly trying to improve our ability to deliver a quality legal education remotely and through hybrid technologies. So we are grateful for some CARES Act support and really helping us to get situated for what the future might look like, but also frankly, just to catch up on what some other schools already had. And I can say that having come from, deaning at 2 other schools and sort of knowing where we were in terms of the tech at those 2 other schools. And, Richardson, we're going to get there, but we are sprinting right now to catch up a bit. And I would suggest to you that this is going to be an important part of how we also have to think about, as I mentioned before, access. And clearly, pandemic or no pandemic, the methodology of delivery of education will likely be more diverse going forward, whether that's having some online opportunities, some hybrid opportunities that complement in-person, classroom, face-to-face, socially distanced for now, delivery methodologies. So we're working on that right now really quickly. I say that all against, again, a backdrop of who are we? Why were we created, and who do we want to be? And we are obviously a place with a deep, deep mission. Our roots run deep here. We are created to serve Hawaii. And, how do we implement CJ Richardson's mission, vision, values, and recognize the importance of diversity and inclusion, right? And that we move from exclusion to inclusion, and frankly, recognize that there's a difference between equality and equity. And I have the image on the right. I came across it. It's from Washington State, Determinants of Equality. And I think it's well done as we think about all of the things that go into allowing us the prospect of being more equitable, right? What are people's access to health and human services? What is the quality of education? What is affordable, right, to people? How do we think about equitable law and justice? So these are all feeding into the dynamics of the law. And I wanted to put it up because this is this is what we're called to consider in all things that we do, right? How do we recognize that not everybody is coming from the same place, that we want a variation of voices, that diversity makes a difference. We don't want just tokenism, and recognizing that there is an investment in that as we create strong and vibrant communities, right? So I want to just situate that as a very important foundational dynamic, as we are also a Native Hawaiian place of learning. And how do we take these things seriously at our core as we innovate? So one of the things I'm really happy about is we've launched an Island Leadership Lab. And this Island Leadership Lab will start next Saturday on the 16th. And I'm delighted, this is sort of a passion project of mine that really does tether to how we conceptualize leadership. And Chuck was kind enough to say, I'm one of around 28 women of color law deans. And the crazy thing for me is, as I'm in my 11th year of deaning, I've been told that I'm the senior Black law school woman dean. And this is only my 11th year. But this shows you how nascent our diversity efforts are and our efforts around inclusion are, including in higher ed, right? That this could be my 11th year and I could be one of the senior deans of color. And so it makes me think about, well, how do we even think about leadership, right? Certainly no one ever said to me that I had anything that would remotely resemble the qualities of a leader. And I think we need to start tapping people on the shoulder and laying that groundwork for them to see themselves as well as leaders. And Hawaii is in the literature and on the websites, a majority minority state. Richardson has been routinely recognized year after year of one of the most diverse law schools in this country. So what does leadership look like? Given who we are and where we are, surely we have something to say about that. And I would really love to be a school that plows that terrain in service of our students so that they, no matter where they're coming from, no matter what their experiences have been, also have the opportunity to lead, right? Also have someone saying to them, you too have the ability to do something that brings you joy and that makes a difference. And we're here to help you do that. So the Leadership Lab is really an opportunity to build pipelines to leadership, knowing full well that Richardson lawyers already have incredible positions in this state and beyond as leaders. So how do we continue to make sure that we're graduating students who have a toolkit of leadership as well as a calling of leadership? So I'm really happy about this. And, I'm really grateful that former Mayor Caldwell stepped up and volunteered for this, and former AG for Hawaii, Kenji Price, Catherine Ngo of the CEO of Central Pacific Bank, and Kelly Testi, the president and CEO of the Law School Admission Council, in addition to several Omidyar fellows who are helping to shape this program. And Noelani Kalipi in particular is really just bringing an extraordinary curriculum. And I have to also just lift up the Omidyar group for a very generous donation that allowed us to launch this program. And I'm hoping that we can anchor it at the law school beyond the pilot years. 2 years pilot. So I wanted to say I'm grateful for that donation, and I hope we can continue to invest in this opportunity for our students. Similarly, as we think about what the law school is trying to do to round out our curriculum and to supplement and complement our faculty, I want to let you know about our January term curriculum and our excellent faculty that are joining us. Ruth Okadeji from Harvard is again coming this year. She is the Jeremiah Smith Professor of Law at Harvard Law School and co-director of the Berkman Klein Center, which is an incredible IP and tech and innovation center at Harvard. They do tremendous work. This year, she's speaking about access to vaccines and global justice. Maggie Hagan, I've known her for years. We serve on a couple boards together, and Maggie gave me a tour of her design lab at Stanford a couple of years ago, and I was absolutely blown away. She is incredible, brilliant. She does terrific work at this design lab as a lawyer. It's a transdisciplinary, my language, endeavor at Stanford that just brings together a lot of people, a lot of amazing talent, students, faculty, staff to problem solve towards the future with design thinking. So she is going to teach developing a more human-centered legal system for us. And I want to just lift up a conversation I had with Chief Justice Rechtenwald in one of my one-on-ones very early on when I started here. And he and I were both talking about design thinking and the need to sort of bake this into curricula more intentionally. So I hope he's happy about this. I never forgot that conversation because it was nice to meet a fellow traveler in terms of thinking about systems and process thinking and such. So Maggie is a leading light in this regard. I'm grateful that the Honorable Wes Porter is again going to join us. He's just been such a generous part of a generous leader who has joined us year after year. He's going to teach the Hawaii Federal Trial Academy. And I have to just say, Wes taught an amazing course for us in the summer, and I'll speak to that later, but I'm really happy that he's again made himself available. Rakaya Yerby is a professor out of St. Louis University. She's both in the Employment Law Center there and the Health Law Center. She's the co-founder actually of the Institute for Healing Justice and Equity. And SLU has repeatedly had the #1 ranked health law center in the country. And so, you know, her work is anchored in a very, very robust center at St. Louis University. And I can say this because I used to teach there for the first 7 or 8 years of my academic career. And they've done great things, and Rakaya being recruited there as a lateral just really amplifies the great work they're already doing out of that health law program in the Midwest at SLU. She's going to teach race, gender, and health justice for us, really amplifying and playing off the conversations that have been engendered throughout this pandemic, as we've seen the disparities that have been made more obvious, if not exacerbated, by this pandemic. Rhonda McGee is an incredible leading light. She does fantastic work around mindfulness in the law. She teaches at the University of San Francisco. She's going to teach our evening program class over the J term, Mindfulness and Professional Identity Development and the Inner Work of Justice for All. She'll be joined with one of the University of Hawaii's leading lights around mindfulness. He's a scientist actually at SOAS, but Noah Pomeroy has been a member of our law school community really since I've been asking him to teach mindfulness training sessions at the law school last year, and he's just incredible. So he's going to join Rhonda for a couple of sessions, and I'll tell you why the focus on mindfulness as well as we continue this conversation. So in terms of other initiatives, with all of the backdrop, sort of the crisis management, but we've got to push forward through this and thinking about how do we innovate despite our scarce resources. It's one of the things that I feel really passionately about is that all law schools, regardless of whether you're like a crit like me and I teach contracts, crim law, and torts as my 3 first-year courses. Those are the courses I sort of grew up as a baby academic teaching, and legal professions. Then you have your seminars, right? So I would teach like a sports law ethics, and I would teach professional responsibility, I think I mentioned, and I teach critical race theory and whatever, frankly, other seminar the dean needed me to teach. But my bread and butter were in the first year. So contracts, torts, and crim law. And through all of those courses and the upper year is a strong economic heartbeat, right? Is a strong financial heartbeat. It begs an understanding of how our economic system works. And it's been an increasing concern of mine that people who care and talk about social justice and talk about sort of the imperatives in that space, and I'm one of them, uncouple it from a deep understanding of how our business fundamentals work. And it's my sense that you got to know how both to be able to actually make a difference. So part of the business boot camp springboards off of some work I did when I was in DC. There I called it the business basics boot camp. So a lot of alliteration, but really just trying to urge our students, no matter what they're going to do, whether it's environmental, whether it's financial securitization, whether it's, working in the public sector, whether it's family law, whether it's wills trust, whatever it is, having an understanding of business fundamentals, even those bullets we've laid out, can only help you better serve your client and make the difference in the world that you want to make. And it will prevent you from being shut out of spaces where decisions are being made that end up impacting your community, our communities in any event. And I feel deeply about this, especially with respect to diversity. Getting more women and people of color into these conversations is crucial if we're actually going to change anything, and the disparities that are, I think, exacerbated and more prevalent in the society. So that's part of the grounding in the business basis boot camp. And I'm really delighted that last year when we ran it, we're going to run it again this year. I just want to thank Professor Charlie Booth in particular for working with me to lead this, but the students showed up. It was over their March break. It was in the evening, and it was the same week that there was St. Patrick's Day, and they showed up. So I just want to celebrate our students for recognizing that these are crucial concepts that can only help them be excellent attorneys in service of others. Last year, we innovated, I guess it was just this past summer, to split the summer session in two, to offer more courses for our students. And so, you know, we'll see how that goes going forward, but it was a robust enrollment, and I'm grateful because we were trying to allow them, especially the evening students, the evening part-time students, to have more opportunities to take classes that they need to, again, round out their curriculum. So we made sure that we had professional responsibility in there. We made sure we had ad law. We made sure that we had bar courses in there, in addition to trial tactics, et cetera. And that was the workshop I mentioned that Wes Porter taught for us, Judge Porter. So again, trying really hard to make sure that our students get what they need, especially as we focus on ensuring their ability to be successful practicing attorneys and go through that licensure process. I foreshadowed the question, why mindfulness, why wellness? And I want to just commend this jurisdiction for taking seriously lawyer well-being. The report, if you haven't read it, that was the task force generated, I believe it was the Honorable Justice Sabrina McKenna and Louise Ng and an entire committee. I hope I'm not leaving out people, but it's a really impeccable report. And I take it seriously. We've been trying to do mindfulness work at all of the schools at which I've been a part. And I'm grateful for the work of the task force in situating the importance of well-being of our attorneys, both personally and professionally, because we know, especially now, people have been struggling. And I don't think it's an understatement to say that many people are not their best selves. And it would be hard for people to be their best selves, given what we've seen and experienced, and the fear and the anxiety and the drumbeat of the pandemic and the loss and the grief. I mean, when the number last week was uttered that we have lost over 700 and I believe 30,000 people in this country to the pandemic, I don't think we've even started to process that. I know I haven't. And maybe that's my own sort of denial and not really wanting to deal with those numbers, but that is massive, right, for our community. And it's devastating. And it's one of the things we don't often talk about is it's devastating on a personal level. I suspect that, like me, you know people who have passed, and you've lost people like me. Many people have. So I just want to situate this time during which we're expecting people to just march on. What is it? Keep calm and carry on, right? Despite everything that's been going on. So, you know, we're trying to support our students, not just with financial aid and scholarships, and we're reinvesting, and, you know, I'm trying to raise money for scholarship support for our students. So, you know, we would welcome your support, and your ongoing generosity is greatly appreciated, because this is a time of strife. Many people have been economically impacted. We know that, especially in Hawaii. It's a challenging time, so we're really trying to do more work on the front end to better support our students coming in. And it is not the case that our school is cheap. You know, we are a public school that has a public school tuition, but it's not inexpensive, especially when you factor in the cost of attendance and the high cost of living in Hawaii. So more work has to be done to support our students financially so they can focus on their school and not be distracted by their finances and having to take on additional work, for example, when they're trying to study for the bar. That's not something we want people to have to do, but many of our students have to do that. So we have to think intentionally and more strategically about how to better support them, while acknowledging that they're stressed. This was a word cloud from one of our events, right? Just the touch base with our students, while recognizing that they feel empowered, but they're worried, but they're motivated, but they're frustrated, but they're happy to be here, but they love this community, they feel a sense of triumph, but they're also experiencing tension, right? So, and anxiety, and it's human, right? They're humans in this place. So the question of how do we recognize the challenges and taking seriously the Hawaii Task Force on Wellness and suggestions. I've launched mindfulness training programs. We've started again this year. In fact, we had Noah Pomeroy, who I highlighted on a previous slide, introduce our orientation sessions this summer. And that was well received, just trying to center people, and the science is there that, you know, mindfulness and meditation does improve focus and decreases stress, and just trying to inculcate, as JABSON has done really well in their curriculum. I try to go to JABSON's Friday mindfulness sessions as often as I can, and they're excellent. And that's the med school, right? I figure they know what they're talking about, right? If they're centering mindfulness. I also worked with Headspace to make sure that our students could have Headspace for free. This says it's for our employees. I would love to get it for our employees, but right now it's only for our students. So they can take a pause for 5 minutes or 10 minutes to get some Headspace through this app. It's if it's not the #1 app, it's one of the most highly regarded apps around mindfulness and meditation in the world. And the reason I sort of figured out that they would work with us is, you know, my husband works for the United Nations and in Europe, and they got Headspace during the pandemic for their employees. And I was like, what? The United Nations employees there, through the staff union got mindfulness? That's brilliant. Can I get it for our students? Right? The answer is yes. So I'm really happy that a number of our students are taking advantage of this resource. I hope it will help with this and help them be the best students they could be despite these very challenging times. That's my hope. It's an investment in them. We're also trying to invest in our faculty to really celebrate what they're doing and sing their praises, not just locally and regionally, but nationally. And this is important as we think about some of these other sort of overhanging variables. You know, we were talking before about accreditation. Certainly there's the US News and World Report ranking. I don't want to over stress that because, you know, it is what it is. But we have a great faculty. And so part of what, you know, I'm trying to do, we've launched 2 additional publications, I'll call it that, to celebrate the work of our faculty, so people know what's going on here while they vote on us, right? So they hear from us regularly, so they know that what our faculty is up to as they cast their ballots every November. So this is just one of our new pieces to celebrate the faculty. There's another piece that comes out regularly now to celebrate our faculty scholarship, as scholarship and research is also being emphasized by our rankings organizations. Part of that strategy necessarily has to involve a communications approach that is innovative. And I'm looking forward to moving forward with our website overhaul in the coming months. I'm grateful that the university has given us the go-ahead on that. And we're trying to think about how do we leverage social media, again, with constrained resources. So we have a student helping us with that. And to think about, again, how do we get the word out? You know, some of us were talking before, Chuck mentioned, you know, signing on to Kekula, and I put the information in the website. So we are trying to do more intentional communications locally, regionally, and nationally to make sure that people understand the great work that our faculty, staff, and students are doing. So this is all part of our efforts. Of course, this is just a silly, it's not silly, it's important, but it's my snap of my Amazon page. And I just say this as it's just one part of the ways in which we are trying to improve and enhance our resources. And I want to thank our Alumni Association for working with me on this. I don't know if I'm the only one that uses Amazon. I will tell you, I sort of maybe use that too much. But at any rate, started when I was buying diapers in bulk years ago with the kids. But, you can designate a nonprofit, and that's just from me in August, what I have already designated to Richardson, because we are at a point where every cent matters. And so I keep saying, we're doing all of this, we're doing all of this, we're trying all of this, we're trying all of that in a resource constrained environment. And I think that's our biggest challenge. It's not that different from a lot of schools, but because we are so dependent here on tourism, and then it factors into the state economy, and it factors into the university economy, and then which trickles down to us, we really are trying to be creative about and thoughtful about ensuring that we have the resources to not just keep the lights on, but to actually be able to be more innovative and intentional and strategic going forward in service of our students, or else we're just not going to be as competitive as we need to be. Because a lot of schools during the pandemic have been hiring. A lot of schools during the pandemic have been investing. A lot of schools during the pandemic have been able to build things. And, we're trying to do a lot of that ourselves, but, I think Hawaii has also disparately been impacted by the pandemic because of the way our economy is structured. So part of what I am doing is also obviously trying to ensure that people continue to think about the law school in their philanthropic portfolios, I'll put it that way, and to think about how they can frankly support our students, whether that's hiring our students, and they're tremendous students, in their, into their firms or government entities or nonprofits, and also the ways in which we can continue to just directly invest in the school so we can do what we need to do to better serve the state and the region, and to share that with the country. So those are my 2 cents, 3 cents. Happy to talk about anything else or to answer questions.
That was fantastic. So, Camille, you've inferred a lot of ways in which you and the law school are working to move the needle, not just toward diversity. And the law school here is one of the most highly ranked in the country for diversity, both student body and faculty, and also in post-law school employment. And there's a connection between those two. How do those two connect in your mind?
Diversity and post-law school employment? Yeah, absolutely. So
diversity and empowerment.
And thank you for that. Diversity. So we talk generally about diversity and inclusion. And I've been saying, and I just started to write about it, that the missing leg on that three-legged stool is empowerment. If not, it begs the question, diversity and inclusion for what? Towards what end, right? Why do we care if not to tee up leaders and lawyers and students and staff and faculty to be empowered to make a difference? I'm not saying what that difference should be, and I'm not saying in what space that difference should be focused, but we want them to be empowered to exercise their voice, to amplify their being, to make a difference in some way. And so I think that E at the end of, it's usually diversity, inclusion, and equity, also has to have an empowerment dynamic so that the people we are talking about who infuse our organizations, our enterprises, can do what they think they need to do to make those spaces better for everybody.
That's great. How can the bar build, develop, expand, sustain meaningful allyship for that?
Yeah. So I will say that where there's a will, there's a way. And I really think increasingly that Public-private partnerships are key, right? So how do we work together? Because I'll just be honest, the law school can't do it on its own. we just can't. No law school can. But certainly we need to partner with you all, with the bar more intentionally. I think that when we talk about pipelines, that's important to build those pipelines. But I think increasingly we need to also not just build the cohort coming into the law school, we need to partner those students with positions. So I'll tell you about something we did when I was at WCL at American University. I had a great alumni. We were at dinner one night, and he works at a huge firm in LA, national firm, and the corporate space, corporate litigation. He said, it's really hard for us to get students of color, and they started recruiting out of Howard, and I support that. That's fantastic. Absolutely continue to recruit out of HBCUs, Indigenous serving institutions, Latinx serving institutions, all of those schools. I celebrate them. But I was also like, what about us? We had then like over 30% students of color, more women than men coming in that year. And so I convinced him to come and spend some time with us. Long story short, what developed out of that was a partnership, not just with his large firm, national firm, but also with eBay. And I can say this because it's been written up in law.com. So it was an eBay, Meyer Brown, WCL collaboration. And so we would support our students in applying for this incredible opportunity to split their summers with Mayor Brown in LA and then eBay in, I think, Palo Alto. And they got paid, right? And then they actually hired that student. So, we were building the pipeline, but we were building the pipeline experientially as well, right? So we had the students of color and the women students of color and all sorts of wonderful diversity of thought that students we were recruiting. But it's one thing to say, and here are all these great legal opportunities, professional opportunities for you students. It's another thing to say, and these firms, organizations, enterprises will hire you and let you be exposed to their work so you can see you can do this too. You might decide, as one of our first students going through the program, oh my gosh, like I really love fintech or whatever she was doing. You know what I mean? How would you know if you don't ever have the chance to be coached and be mentored by people like you, right? Who have done it and who can not just say, this too is for you, but to show the students this too is for you. And I am here to support you in that. So I think increasingly we have to start thinking in those ways as well. And I hope to do some of that here as well. I started some conversations, planting some seeds, but I really do think that, and that, if you do that 5 years in a row, that makes a tremendous difference. If you do that 10 years in a row, 20 years in a row, right there, you've got at least 20 incredible people who have gone into these spaces, right? Becoming the leaders that they can be and making a difference. That's one thought.
So one of the questions we got was, what's your sense of what the breakdown is between Hawaii residents, other states residents, and international residents among the student population and also the faculty?
Yeah, I think that changes year to year. Well, it's fairly stable, but at the margins, I think we are absolutely, in terms of our students, largely recruiting from the Hawaiian Islands. And when I say that, I'm pretty sure it's over 70%, maybe even over 80%. And with the rest of the JD students coming from the continental US. There might be a few who come from other countries who have been educated in the US, so they have a US or Canadian, for example, undergrad, but by and large, our students are drawn locally. Same with our staff. I think our staff, mainly is obviously sort of similarly recruited. For our faculty, I think, it depends. I think recently we've hired a number of faculty who are from the islands or from Hawaii. But I also think there is probably more geographic diversity in terms of places of birth, let's put it that way, amongst our faculty.
What are the major challenges that the law school encounters that the bar might be able to contribute to, help, and support?
I want to just emphasize how tremendous our students are. And I really hope people will continue to think about how they can mentor and engage and support our students in their career trajectories and their career opportunities. And I think that is coaching, that is mentoring, that is guiding, that is resume review through our Office of Professional Development, but it's also, to be totally blunt, it's also hiring, right? I mean, most people come to law school, to practice law. And most people come to this law school because they want to stay here. And I know, again, when we zoom out the aperture to the entire state, I mean, the pandemic has hurt everybody or many people. And so I recognize there might have been, there is likely a conversation embedded there around how many people can we actually hire, right? But this is a crucial investment in the students, especially as many of them have taken on debt to get at least two degrees that they have, right? Their undergrad and their law degree. So I want to start there to just encourage people to continue to look to our students. We are going to continue to support our students in thinking about legal opportunities capaciously. I really want our students to think about all areas of legal practice and all areas of leadership, including business leadership, right, as something for them. And then obviously, the ways in which alumni at any school can help are as well with resources, program development, through their generosity, through their engagement, their attendance at events, their networking, their support of our faculty. Those are all ways that, certainly in my experience, friends and alumni have been the fuel at all of the schools where I have served as dean. And I've benefited from that as a faculty member as well, in terms of my own scholarship being, underwritten sometimes by the generosity of donors. Certainly as a student, I'm not embarrassed by this. I'm proud of this, but going back to my dad, my dad got a scholarship to go to the University of West Indies when he was, a young student in Jamaica. And he was telling me and my sisters the story again recently, like he got in and then he was like, I can't afford this, back in the 60s, And so he was like, I'll work as a mailman. I'll continue to work as a mailman until I can afford that. And after 5 years, I should be able to afford it. And then he got the next notice from the University of West Indies that a generous donor, had given this gift. I'm sorry, it's just so moving to me that this person that my dad never met really underwrote not just my dad's life from like a poor kid from Iacobucci, Jamaica, which none of you have ever heard about. I hadn't heard of, I would never have heard about it either. It's not a place where tourists go, right? And that changed his life. It changed my mom's life and it changed our lives, right? And we don't know who these people, we don't know who they were. And so, he was recounting this because my sister and I gave my parents this gift of this book that can be created. I think it's called Storyboard or something, where they're sent questions every other week and they basically dictate responses back or type responses back. And at the end of it, they're going to get a book of their lives. And so we're getting snippets from my mom and dad's interviews for this book. And he wrote about it. And as fast forward, like he became a teacher, he was recruited to go to the University of Toronto again, another scholarship out of Kingston at the University of West Indies to Toronto, all based on the generosity of strangers, right? And he wrote about it for this book. And I was like moved to tears, especially now fast forward that I'm in higher ed. So that's the story of our lives, right? And, I don't want to underestimate the transformative potential of that possibility as we think about how to serve our students. And then I always say to the students, and then when you have the chance, you give back, right? You change someone's life. You do what you can when you can, and we're all constrained, but you do what you can when you can. So there are so many ways that alumni and friends can contribute, from reading resumes to talking to students to giving students a tour of their buildings as they can safely and during a pandemic, and really just remembering that our students are really our heartbeat, and whatever we can do to support them will make a tremendous difference in their lives. And I would also suggest likely the lives of their families and communities.
That's fantastic. We got a specific question. Who's going to be succeeding David Callies in land use? And you can answer that, but I also want to get into one that's maybe a little larger, and that's, what is the law school doing? And I'm going to pick up on wonderful word you used earlier, to cultivate transdisciplinary and transnational relationships and learning experiences for the students.
Yeah. So to the first question, we just got the go ahead maybe a few weeks ago to actually start hiring, right? So that is the process. That was sort of the year lost. So we'll see. That's why I was sort of bemoaning the fact that we lost a year, right? Because of the hiring freezes that were implemented. I understand why they were implemented, but we are now just starting that process, which will allow us to hire someone who will start in the summer, fingers crossed, of 2022. At the same time, there is a committee that is that I struck with the support of Kathleen Hogarty, our Director of Development, to try to raise money for a Callies chair, a chair in honor of Professor David Callies and all his tremendous work and his sort of iconic involvement and support of this university and the law school. So at the same time, we hope to hire. Remember, we were only granted the possibility of hiring an entry-level faculty member. We are also trying to raise money to support a chair in his honor. And you know, it's my hope that maybe, depending on if that happens in a way that is well funded, we can think about, you know, hiring at a more senior level. But as of right now, we can't. So that's the resource constrained backdrop. To your other question, Chuck, around transdisciplinary, interdisciplinary, international, you know, you probably know, everybody knows we have some great programs. Be that the international program, can get a certificate. Pacific Asian Legal Studies, you can get a certificate, obviously. And we have Charlie Booth also does work with the international Asian Pacific, you know, and the financial systems, business systems. So those are long-standing programs at the law school. I think the part of that we have yet to explore really robustly is how can we also partner with other schools and universities beyond the JD MBA, for example, which is fairly robust, but are there other possibilities? You know, Mark Levin is the director of the Center for Japanese Studies, and Taeyong Beck, these are both law faculty, is the director for the Center for Korean Studies. So they obviously fan out system-wide, university-wide, and it begs the question, what else can we do in that respect? To do more, we need faculty and staff who have the bandwidth to innovate in those ways, right? So, and to think about those possibilities and to sort of make those possibilities their own. And I would be supportive, but we have to think about what those would be, while not detracting from the core that we really have to pay attention to for licensure as well.
Fantastic. So in our last few minutes here, we're open to questions, but I want to get a little bit more personal. For you personally, Camille Nelson, what's the most personally meaningful part of your experience and relationships here? And what's at the very, very top of your wish list?
Thank you for that question, Chuck. That's really sweet. You know, what makes me happy is when I think we've actually made a difference in the life of a student and the lives of our students. And I don't want to define what that means, but I am pained by the struggle, right? So I am, and that's personal to me, sort of in terms of where, you know, I came from and the ways in which a student with talent is deprived of the ability to focus because they're stressed about, I'll just be straight, resources, right? Like it's hard to study when your belly is grumbling, to just be totally basic. So anything we can do to allow our students to be more focused on being the best attorneys they can be and getting through school successfully without distraction, it is a win for me, because I think there is incredible talent, right? There's incredible talent. It's just the opportunities are not equally dispersed through our society. So how do we make sure that we better support our students, whether that's through bar, so they don't have to work, right? So they can optimize their licensure results, so they don't have to work 1 or 2 jobs during the JD program, right? So I really just think, and that's a larger question that includes sort of wellness and counseling and other supports and quiet space and stable Wi-Fi and, you know, access to transportation. Like, I recognize there are so many things going on in anyone's life at the same time, but if we think about it that way, and we recognize that some students can study peacefully with very little distraction, and very little anxiety around their own well-being or the well-being of their families. And then we know that for other students, that's exactly not the case. I think that will allow us to think about what we could do even on an individual level, right? So those are some of the things that when I feel that we've made a difference in an individual student's ability to be the best student they can be, then I'm happy. Because I know if we give them that chance, they can succeed.
That's wonderful. One other question we just got is there active recruiting going on for students from the Pacific Islands?
So one of the things we're doing, we are looking for a new director of enrollment management. The answer is yes, but we could do better. So we always have been, and in fact, historically, we've had LSAT prep courses on neighboring islands. I will say during the pandemic, I don't think those were really robust efforts because of the pandemic, although Zoom allows us all to be together. I'm not quite sure that they are bearing the types of results that I think with more intense focus we could achieve. So that, can I just say one thing? I will say that's why I started with the hybrid and hot technology, right? Is there a way for us to think about making sure students from neighboring islands and Pacific Island nations can access an excellent Richardson education without incurring the cost of physically moving here and renting a place in Honolulu, right? There's an initiative there just waiting to happen, right? How can we be a part of that? And having had students from all over the world here and other jurisdictions where I've taught, who DC, Boston, really expensive, who I know would have rather, if they could, stay where they were and live with their parents, or stay where they were and have cheaper rent, and then not have the compounding debt load, right, upon graduation. I think there's some possibilities there, and we're presently studying what some of those possibilities might yield.
Truly wonderful. Dean Nelson, thanks so much for sharing your time with us and for redirecting our understanding and our intention to the importance of a truly holistic approach to the student, to learning, to the connection between people.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And thank you
You've
for
been a
allowing
great
me
model
to...
for all of us.
Oh, you're so kind.
So next time we get you back, we'll be asking you 3, 5, 10 years down the line, what would you like to see that's not there yet? What's missing? But we'll leave that so that we'll have a reason to bring you back. Thank you all so much. We want to respect your time. We know we've used up today's portion of it. Any last thoughts or questions from anyone? Let me take a quick look.
Thank you.
No, I think that pretty much covers it. Dean,
Thank
thanks so
you.
much.
Thank you all. I really appreciate you coming today. It's nice to see you all. Stay well.
Take care. Be safe, be well,
Thank
be
you.
healthy.
Thanks so much.